Terrace here. I am a biohacker and product equipment researcher. So I'm the one who does the due diligence on various companies, modalities, and I consult with practitioners and just everyday people looking to avoid wasting their money and to get the best possible therapeutic outcomes. You can email me anytime with questions, and I have access to many different companies. Get my emails below in the description box, and we're going to jump in today on the video covering just kind of the basics of the difference or how the comparison would be between this PEMF that you see here on the screen. It's called Cell Vital Home Care, formerly known as QRS. QRS 101S is the new model. This is the Cell Vital. It's just a different aesthetic color scheme design. But basically we'll be going over how this PEMF compares to hydrogen inhalation. Hydrogen inhalation, kind of as you can see on the screen here, there's varying different machines out there, all kinds of different brands. Comes in all shapes and sizes. And if you don't know what hydrogen inhalation is, maybe just do a quick Google. But basically it's breathing in H2. So there's again there's a bond between two hydrogen molecules or atoms. So basically it's a H plus an H, and that equals H2. Okay, so two hydrogens. And that gas that you end up breathing, which is coming from splitting water inside like a little reservoir, that has a lot of benefits. There's, I don't know, 1,500, 1,600, I don't know how many different studies there are at this point between the consumption of hydrogen-rich water and inhalation. Inhalation is very powerful, very effective. If you need guidance on machines, yeah, you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I can guide you. I've been in the hydrogen market really since the beginning, pretty much, in the United States, last 15 years or whatever it's been. And so we're just going to kind of briefly cover a comparison between hydrogen therapy and this specific brand of PEMF. Now, this, if you haven't seen videos about the specific brand of PEMF, there is literally no other PEMF like it. So for the most part, you can actually compare many other PEMFs against one another because they are very similar to one another, just in general. A lot of them you like sine waves or square waves or things like that. They're all very, very similar. And with the QRS, however, and that stands for Quantron Resonance Systems, it's a company based in Germany, it is just so very different in terms of what it produces waveform-wise. That literally no other company produces the exact same waveform and the same set of frequencies. This brand, again, you can watch other videos on it, has the most clinical research studies published of any PEMF in the industry. And as far as the ones that are easy to track, it could be a couple hundred. Hydrogen therapy is a little bit easier to track the full amount of studies on it. But what is interesting is that this PEMF has been tested or researched against around 120 different disease models. And hydrogen is also a little bit unusual in that it is actually another therapy also that has been tested around a similar amount. Now I think it's around 150 disease models, maybe more. So hydrogen also, like this PEMF, is essentially very broadly systemically beneficial for a wide range of different health conditions. So both of these are absolutely very synergistic with one another. They're complementary. It's not like a case of either or, although, of course, if you're on a budget, right, and you're trying to figure out what should I buy, before the other, then maybe this video will provide a little bit of insights. So the video won't be like super comprehensive, just from the perspective of both of these modalities are quite complex in terms of all the different ways they affect the body. So then you also have to consider that each of these modalities may have benefits, let's say, for the same metabolic process or condition in the body. However, the ways that it may help are different. Again, complementary, but different. So this wouldn't be like an exhaustive comparative video going through absolutely every scenario, right? Every single cellular process and condition, health condition, stuff like that. Good news is you really can't lose with either one. Whatever you invest in, they're both incredibly powerful and will help with just about anything. So that's the good news. Okay. And in an ideal world, of course, you would inhale hydrogen and use the PEMF at the same time. Sure, absolutely. Ideal scenario, or at least in the course of the same day, if you have the budget for it. By the way, let's just wrap up budget real quick. Hydrogen machines, there's many that are just grossly overpriced, okay, without justifying the reason it's priced at that. You'll spend somewhere between like 1,500 or 2,000 to 5,000 range. That's about the max you should spend, honestly. Try to stay within that range. And it's going to depend on what their method is of producing the gas, the component grade, and the flow rate of the gas. And it's also can be even more nuanced than that. But you definitely got to watch out. You can for sure be ripped off in the industry. So with the PEMF, it is going to be going up in price soon across some dealers. However, right now, $34.95. What is a little unusual is this PEMF has a 6-month return window. I don't literally know any other company that offers that for any type of product, but it's a 6-month return window. That's how well it works with just about anything. And then the hydrogen machines, most companies, it's pretty standard, like 30 days, something like that. That's usually what you'll find. And some companies have no return policy, but usually that's what it is. All right, so moving on. So this would be kind of like one way of kind of making a basic statement about how they would compare and how they're different, although it is absolutely more complex than this. But one important point to bring up, or different points, would be while both of the therapies are scientifically valid, the QRS PEMF addresses the deeper root cause of disease than hydrogen therapy, which is basically the electrical energy deficit of the cell itself, also known as transmembrane potential right here. So by restoring the cellular membrane potential to negative 70 millivolt and actively transporting vital ions, and there's a list of them, by the way, which we'll see further down, but it's all the major ones that are responsible for most of the cell-to-cell signaling processes and just functions. The QRS provides the foundational energy required for all other metabolic processes, including those supported by hydrogen, to function. Does that make sense? So you may have, of course, come across this concept of body electricity, transmembrane potential, things like that. Even though this is talked about here and there in different product categories, maybe even often, when you dig deep, you'll find that actually there's very, very few modalities or products that are actually proven capable of influencing something like transmembrane potential. So while it's absolutely a real concept and an important one that's an active part of anything, if we're from the context of health and restoring health and regenerating, again, there's very limited options to restoring that potential and in a way that is proven for therapy. So this is very confusing because this particular aspect, when it comes to PEMF category or industry, a significant majority of PEMF talk about this concept, allude to this concept, try to associate their product, their equipment, their PEMF with accomplishing this, although if you read very carefully, they never quite fully exactly make a claim that might hold up in a court. Okay? Sometimes they do, but you'll see this more commonly talked about with other PEMF, although most of those companies can't really back up in any way, really, that it's influencing transmembrane potential. So it is very confusing. In fact, the first company to really talk about and prove the effect on transmembrane potential was Quantron Resonance Systems, if you know your PEMF history. And literally, like, what company came out then? Okay, then what was the company after that? And then what was the company that came around then? That sort of like linear progression of history in this category. And this company put out 70 plus lawsuits based around other companies claiming ion transport and influencing transmembrane potential. They basically shut down a good amount of the companies that were talking about that. But still, to this day, you'll still see some companies referencing it, but they reference it in a very kind of indirect way. They're hoping that you, just the consumer, associates in your mind, connects the dots that, you know, their device is affecting this, although they don't really come out and say it directly, because again, they wouldn't want to be sued by this company. So I had to dive into that a little bit, because just by saying that, some people in their minds are like, oh, I heard, you know, this and this and this. And there is other ways beyond PEMF to affect this, by the way, but we don't have to get into that. But again, very few methods. It is kind of a holy grail. That's why I'm kind of circulating around this point. It is kind of a holy grail to affect all the main ions transport across cell membranes that affect transmembrane potential, and again, a lot of other metabolic processes and redox functions. It is kind of the holy grail to be able to influence those things inside the cell, outside the cell. So that is part of the reason why they offer 6-month return window, and it helps with just about any condition. And hydrogen also kind of is unique like that. It's smallest element, and so can go anywhere in the body and cross into any type of cell. See how they're kind of already overlapping a little bit with PEMF, really any PEMF. You know, electromagnetic fields can affect the entire body. It could affect any cell in your liver or wherever, right? At least the electromagnetic energy is what I'm saying, could actually influence, you get what I'm saying, any cell. And so hydrogen's a little bit different. If you inhale enough of it, then that gas can be carried through your circulatory system, of course, and arrive at many places. And it's small enough where it could potentially diffuse again anywhere in the body. This cumulatively occurs over time. You reach more and more and more areas of the body. The more you do it, the more you use it. Okay? But you see how that's kind of connected? In other words, they're both kind of very powerful for so many conditions. Before you even talk about anything, they're just both kind of very powerful and effective on so many conditions, because they can reach and get to so many different areas of the body easily. And you know, if you know anything about health, everything's interconnected in the body. So I wish it was as simple as like, oh, I have this problem in this one area of my body, let me just treat that one specific area. I mean, there's some things like that, but usually it requires supporting multiple areas of the body in a more functional way. And then that's when you get into like, oh, okay, well, these modalities might be synergistic or better than others because of the way they can kind of broadly support all these different areas of the body that are all interconnected. Does that make sense? Hydrogen, there is also other signaling gases. You ever hear of nitric oxide? Okay, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, I forget the other two. But there's like 5 signaling gases. So they're different molecules that different cells will send information on. So this is very fundamental stuff. There's other gases in the body that do that. And hydrogen interacts with those other signaling gases. So while hydrogen has its actual direct signaling effect on the body, it actually influences other signaling molecules as well. That's also part of the way. So it has a bigger effect than you would think. It's more than just hydrogen in a way. So there's other gases also which have a gajillion different functions in the body. It also can influence those things. But this PEMF also, it's using electromagnetic waveform signals, frequencies, signals. It's having signaling effects. That is also, again, why it can affect so many different things in the body. Hydrogen is a signaling-based medicine or treatment or therapy. Same with this specific PEMF as well. So you can kind of see also how they're similar in that sense. So, for example, there's studies, and you can look up exactly how this PEMF is able to so significantly increase nitric oxide production through signaling because of what's happening with the endothelium and more. And or the carrying capacity of oxygen. This PEMF is also affecting gases and the production of those signaling of those gases. There's a lot of synergies here. It's just doing it in a completely different way. And hydrogen also interacts. It's kind of like a master gas. I don't know. And it also interacts with all those different gases, but in not such a electromagnetic way like this PEMF does, the QRS. So hydrogen, it definitely has a selective effect on some pretty nasty reactive oxygen species. Okay, again, it's selective, so it's not like a broad antioxidant that just quelches all types of oxidation, which is pretty cool. With the QRS, so that's basically the primary action of hydrogen, okay? With the QRS, its primary function, or one of its primary functions, is a unique waveform signal. It's a modified sawtooth wave, okay? That has an exponential curve, which is basically matching the natural electrical vibrations of human cells. Okay, so this is where it just gets really complicated, and there's really just no easy way to explain this without a lot of diagrams. But it can create the signal creates something called phase congruence. Okay, and it's like matching and tuning, like a radio station kind of. You tune and you match the vibrational frequency co-resonance of a cell, which has certain effects on the membrane. And so certain ions of energy can be conveyed in that process. And remember that your cells don't eat cheeseburgers and they don't eat kale salads. Your cells are looking for energy currency that ride in on different elements in varying states. They could have a positive charge. They could have a negative charge. Okay? This is where this PEMF, it's having its primary effects. So one really important thing where health goes wrong is when those types of electromagnetic processes that our cells normally endogenously go through, when that gets disrupted for some reason, then it is very much like they're saying here, healthy cells operate like charged batteries, right? So we all know what happens when a charged battery is a little bit too low in power, right? And it's inside of a remote control or some type of thing we're trying to power up, and it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? It just literally doesn't have enough energy it can draw from the battery for whatever that tool is or device to work. Exact same thing. So that device could be, think about this for a second. How many functions does your cell phone have? An unfathomable amount. It has a lot of functions, right? What happens when the battery is too low? Doesn't matter. All those functions, all those important things on there, can't access them anymore. Do you see how serious this is? So this is probably what affects any type of metabolic thing science has ever measured and labeled and said, hey, this is a thing in the body that happens, right? Really anything. This is a thing that happens. We measured, we saw, right? Okay. But all those things only happen depending on the context of how much energy those cells that were involved, how much energy they had to do those things. And I wish it was as simple as like, hey, you don't have enough energy and the cell dies. That would be nice and convenient. But unfortunately, when the cell gets too low in its potential, it starts to go through mutations. And this is where we get certain things from inflammation, pain, cancer, and anything you could imagine, because the cell has to try to survive. So this is also related to the cell danger response, if you've heard of that. So look up cell danger response. A lot of intelligent practitioners and educators are talking about this. This is very important from a healing context. This also directly intervenes in the cell danger response. It rescues them. Says, don't worry, we're going to get some of your core metabolic processes back online again. We're going to give you the energy. We know that you're starving to death and you've mutated all kinds of things to prevent yourself from starving to death. So when cells start to go crazy like that and they're in survival mode, they start to send a lot of crazy signals, which start to pollute the environment with chaotic signals, which are very disruptive to healthy cells. So this PEMF also has an effect on that stuff, okay? All those crazy cellular signals, that would what's called distortion. Hydrogen does not necessarily have like that kind of such a direct effect electromagnetically on all these signals. Now, it might in the case of like, oh, a cell has there's a lot of inflammation in some tissue right now. Okay. Well, if you look at like different aspects of that inflammatory response, hydrogen definitely can have different effects on the molecules that are involved in your immune system that are related to pro-inflammatory, like cytokines, for example, and the ones that are down-regulating that entire process as well, basically keeping things balanced. Okay. So hydrogen can have an effect on like, certain molecules that are related or involved in inflammation responses. Get it? And the PEMF, though, is even more fundamental than that. Okay, so it's even prior to. It's more root cause. So hydrogen is more almost downstream, cleaning up, helping, supporting the byproducts. Okay, the already stressed tissues or cells. If that makes sense. All right, so here's a little comparison graph. Hydrogen therapy, primary reaction, it's chemical, molecular. This PEMF is obviously electric physics. We've gone over that, ion transport and voltage, cellular voltage. One of the main targets of hydrogen is reactive oxygen species. PEMF, this one, it's more about cell membrane potential, restoration, and ion channels. Now again, here's another teaching example. Hydrogen, just to remind y'all, hydrogen can pass through those ion channels, okay? Along with a lot of other elements too. It's not just hydrogen, okay? If you inhale hydrogen and it passes through an ion channel of a bunch of cells, okay, wherever in your body, if those cells needed that hydrogen for supporting some aspect of function, that's what will happen. But it's just one ion or one element, hydrogen, obviously, okay, passing through that ion channel. What about all the other things that pass through the ion channel? For example, see this ions moved here? That's hydrogen. Calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium. And what are we missing? Calcium, potassium, magnesium, sodium, and yeah, I think that might be it. Anyways, and there's more than that as well that cross ion channels, and there's other sorts of things also that form membrane channels that can also be affected by this PEMF. Okay, so hydrogen, you're just getting the benefit of hydrogen that might have an effect on, say, a redox process inside of your cells. Okay. Reducing oxidative stress and inflammation, we talked about with hydrogen. Restoring battery voltage and metabolism, it's a little more primary. So when this gets disturbed, remember, it disturbs many things, as well as the oxidative processes of cells. There's, we could say, cellular respiration that gets disrupted. And then we might have different effects, side effects, like an increase in oxidative stress and inflammation. So this is maybe a little more structural. That would be one way to look at it, okay, in terms of what this PEMF is supporting. Okay, nutrient transport. If you're in less inflammation, okay, and you have less lactic acidosis and things like that, hydrogen for sure over time will help you improve your health a little bit, different ways, and support your immune system, stuff like that. And so, yeah, you will, with less inflammation and thus better circulation in your microcirculation system, you'll get more nutrients transported, okay? So but it's a little bit more indirect. And with the QRS, it's very direct. So when you get down to like, where do nutrients ultimately end up? Well, they usually end up passing across the cell membranes, right? Of all different types of cells. Okay, so there's all kinds of nutrients that need to pass through. Again, the PEMF is helping all of those, it's helping with the membrane potential, the integrity of that membrane, the function of that membrane, the signals. Thus, it assists all nutrients to be transported if necessary, if that's what the cells need, and to get to their destinations as well. And a lot of the getting to the destination is significantly improving the endothelial linings and other aspects of the cardiovascular system and the pulmonary system. One other interesting thing is PEMF clears this electrosmog. That's a lot to talk about, but EMF, electrosmog, affects, long story short, is it affects on the cellular level redox functions and it affects ion transport. It disturbs that. Okay. So if on the cellular level in all different types of cells, electromagnetic radiation, bad kind, is disturbing those processes, what do you think helps reverse that and restore that? Well, the best thing is literally this PEMF for that. So yeah, we do have people that have a lot of electrosensitivities, and they have been able to use this PEMF on the most sensitive setting. And they have been able to reduce that health condition of being electrosensitive by using an electromagnetic device. If you're one of those people, this is worth a shot. Hey, 6-month return period, right? All right. There is a biofeedback aspect. We are not going to go too deep into this, but it auto-adjusts the output of the PEMF based on tissue impedance. Google that if you want to look into what that is. And when you're passively diffusing and inhaling hydrogen, it basically is just going one direction, of course. I didn't touch on this. How does the hydrogen affect electrosmog? This is not exactly correct. Hydrogen actually is phenomenal for every type of radiation. It's incredible. So they've seen incredible things with even the kind of radiation that causes like serious tissue damage or death. They've seen really impressive levels of protection with hydrogen. Obviously the right dosage and used within proximity, right timing to when there's radiation exposure. But it absolutely is very supportive. So if you are a person, again, with radiation sensitivities of any kind, you might even be getting, what's it called? Cancer treatment. My memory today. Chemotherapy with radiation. Hydrogen is perfect adjunct to that for so many different reasons. Actually, in Japan, hydrogen is the officially endorsed Ministry of Health treatment for every form, I think pretty much almost every form of cancer. And they have all kinds of protocols laid out, and they mainly are doing inhalation for the treatment of all the different types of cancers. And they have a lot of success, I will just say that. So it is honestly one of the better things around for cancers. And the PEMF absolutely, when you get into, the mechanisms of why do cells go cancerous, right? Well, this is getting to the roots of a lot of that stuff with this specific PEMF. Generally, with other PEMF, I would say you're at a greater cancer risk. And if you have any questions about that, you might be using a PEMF right now, you want my opinion on that, and you have cancer, you can send me a message. I'm not a doctor or anything, but I do understand PEMF and some aspects of how cells are supposed to function on a biological level. So you do have to watch out. So there are PEMF out there 100% that could increase your risks. And that is actually even researched and well established by certain boards that handle non-ionizing radiation research. And you can look up what their guidelines are on there and then compare them to PEMF that are on the market, and you will see for yourself that there are absolutely even very popular PEMF out there that would be considered carcinogenic and can break DNA strands and all kinds of stuff. Absolutely. I know, it's shocking. And you got doctors and people recommending them. It's insane. So let's scroll on down here. We talked about selective antioxidant. You can look up that further, of course. Remember, this is just a brief summary of things. There's anti-inflammatory signaling. These are the different aspects, benefits of hydrogen therapy. Metabolic markers. It improves a variety of different metabolic markers. helps with exercise recovery, and really does a whole lot more too. But this covers a lot right here. And here's a nice little, I like this little quote here. You can remove the rust oxidation from a car, but if the battery is dead, the car still won't start. Hydrogen removes the rust. QRS recharges the battery. It's a great analogy that covers at least some aspects of the comparison. So again, ideal world, right? We want to remove rust from all the parts and components. Definitely, we do want to do that, ideally. And we also want to recharge the battery, right? We kind of want to do all of it. But everybody, of course, has a little bit of a budget, so it just depends. So moving on, we talked about the restoration. Okay, so a neutral gas, hydrogen, cannot add electrical charge to a cell. It protects the cell machinery from damage, but it does not power the machine. Life is electrical. The transmembrane potential of a healthy cell, right? 70 to 90 millivolts. Aging and disease cause the voltage drop. The QRS acts as a battery charger for the human body. You know what's crazy is that your body uses 50% of its ATP production for maintaining the membranes, membrane integrity of all your cells. 50% of your energy is devoted to that. So that's why also people have transformations with this PEMF, because it's literally able to offer that energy to the membrane integrity process, thus freeing up a tremendous amount of your body's endogenous ATP production. But it also has different aspects of affecting the electron transport chain and also increasing the amount of ATP production. It actually does it through several mechanisms. So it's not just increasing ATP, but also allowing your body to use less of its own endogenous. So there's less of a drain. So this restoration is required for a cell to perform any function, including utilizing the hydrogen. So this PEMF will absolutely help your body to utilize the hydrogen more effectively, as well as any other signaling molecule, as well as any other supplement or nutrient. So it's very, very supportive of, again, any other modality that you're doing, pretty much. So if you're thinking like, oh, well, there's studies on this PEMF increasing the ability for oxygen transport and utilization of oxygen, the carrying capacity of blood with that oxygen, would this be great before hyperbaric chamber or some other oxidative therapy? Absolutely. It's a game changer. It makes those oxidative therapies way, way, way more powerful. So it's a little bit unusual, this PEMF, in terms of what it does. It is a great prerequisite or something you would do as before any other modality. And in some cases, you can do it at the same time as another modality, and that's great, and it is actually supportive. There are some modalities out there that could be counterproductive to one another if you do them at the same time. So hydrogen has no mechanism to force minerals or ions into a cell. It relies on the cell's existing energy to perform transport, right? So there is absolutely a patent on ion transport connected to this waveform. When it comes to bone regeneration, non-union fracture healing, there's not much. This is one weak area of hydrogen. There's not many weak areas, by the way. Hydrogen's pretty awesome. There's a few different reasons for like osteoporosis though, if we're talking about like bones that's deteriorating, and hydrogen does have some indirect supportive mechanisms to conditions like that. But when it comes to like, I need to heal up a bone better, yeah, hydrogen is absolutely very weak. And the gold standard is absolutely proven with this PEMF to the point where they are literally using it on the Mir space station. It was actually the Russians who brought it there, who got it from the Germans. They brought it first, and that's where NASA, or the American space program, learned about it. So a lot of people don't know. So they've done their due diligence, and basically, you've heard of the Schumann frequencies. So one of the few projects Dr. Schumann actually worked on in the PEMF category was with this team, this R&D team related to QRS. Dr. Schumann and brought his genius to the table, along with Dr. Linus Pauling, top 20 scientist, if you don't know him, Dr. Linus Pauling, and then Dr. Robert Becker, famous orthopedic surgeon who was regrowing limbs and doing super cutting edge research with electromedicine, who was also involved in this project, and honestly, a big grouping of a bunch of other geniuses too, top people in their field. Nerve regeneration. Hydrogen will offer anti-inflammatory support related to nerves, which is great, including the brain also, fantastic. But it doesn't do so much with stimulating regrowth like this QRS PEMF does on nerve growth factor, neurites, as well as like just nourishing the nerve tissue with the needed nutrients, which again, QRS is fantastic for. Electrosmog protection, we kind of already mentioned that. Biofeedback resonance, kind of already talked about that. Depth of penetration. Here's the thing about hydrogen. While it is small enough to diffuse into any part of the body if you inhale it, it is still dependent on the status or health of your microcirculatory system and your cardiovascular system. If it's really compromised, diseased tissue, like maybe somebody barely has any nitric oxide production, for example, you will have more limited effects in terms of what that hydrogen can do, okay, versus the delivery mechanism you might expect with an athlete who's doing hydrogen inhalation, right? So you'd really want to ideally work on, the circulatory system itself, the tissues of that organ system, and repair it more. And then hydrogen has more of its effects. So hydrogen, though, in the depth of penetration, in this category to stay on task here, hydrogen will diffuse effectively through inhalation depending on the status of your circulatory system. But with the QRS, magnetic fields are not blocked by any tissues. It passes right through your entire body, out the other side, several feet, in fact. So some people actually use this under a mattress, and it'll pass right up through the mattress, right into their body, okay? So it really has no diffusion or delivery issues, which we've talked about. And that's why also it tends to be so miraculous with different types of brain conditions, acute, chronic, all kinds of things. There's not a lot of modalities that have like a big impact on the brain because of the blood-brain barrier, So that's like part of the challenge, right? Part of the trick of how you like heal and support the brain. This has absolutely no problem at all. It's one of the better things I've seen for different types of brain conditions because it's just absolutely having an impact on every single cell in your entire brain at the same time. So that's why, PEMF can be miraculous, absolutely. And why it's also extremely unusual. Now, I will say that hydrogen inhalation is pretty darn good at getting in the brain because when you inhale that gas through your nose, where do you think it's going? Where do you think it's going first? It's going right up into your brain. And so it is absolutely phenomenal and supportive for a wide variety of brain conditions. What do you think? Stack them both at the same time? Absolutely. Very synergistic. Great thing to do. Nitric oxide system. There is definitely evidence showing how hydrogen supports nitric oxide. But it's different, it just supports it in a different way. And there's a specific setting in here that they make sound very simple, by the way. Approximately 9 hertz. It's like, oh, it's so easy, right? I'm going to just find another PEMF that makes 9 hertz. No. It's that they're just giving a very limited here in this presentation I made. We're not going to get too far into that. It's not as simple as that. Like, oh, just 9 hertz. No. There's a lot more specifications that go along with that to produce the needed effect on the vascular system to stimulate the release of nitric oxide. It's really freaking complicated, actually. So that's just a completely different way of doing those things. If you are curious and you want to learn more, like how does it do that? There is absolutely more information I could share with you if you're curious. Hydrogen, whole body cellular communication. So remember, hydrogen works molecule by molecule, right? It is having a gasotransmitter chemical interaction, but it depends on how much you're inhaling, your dosage, when you need to do it, when you need to get that dosage. There's a lot of factors. And your lifestyle can actually have a big impact as well. on how that works. But there's a lot of areas in your body. There's a lot of space. It's an unfathomable amount of space. So you always have to wonder, like, am I getting enough hydrogen? You see what I'm saying? There's actually there's one hydrogen system that I sell on the market currently that has solved, that is the most proven, let's just say, to elevate total body systemic hydrogen levels in diffusion, if you will, in solution in your body to a level that is required based on studies to produce certain effects systemically. There is one system right now that has fully proven that and accomplished that. And it's actually was made by or created by two well-known people in the hydrogen industry. They've been in it for a couple decades, and they're kind of like experts. And they finally came out with the hydrogen machine after all this time. It took them a while too. So there is one. So if you're like, Alex, I really want to at least have the best chance of getting to hydrogen to all the areas of my body that I need, you know what I mean? And knowing for sure that I'm going to raise my tissue saturation level to the needed levels. I want that guarantee, because I can't be obviously testing people or myself, right? And figuring that out, okay? It requires very specialized testing, and anyways, we're not going to get into it. So there is a system that will do that. I'm not saying that other hydrogen systems that even I sell won't produce great results, but there is one that, because it kind of fits within this topic that I'm talking about right now. But still, even with that one, you can still be limited, even with that best-in-class system, you will still be limited by different factors in the body. You know, there might be still certain tissues that are damaged or compromised in some way, and hydrogen is still struggling a little bit to get to those areas fully, at least to the extent it's needed. And again, PEMF, it's physics and resonance. So absolutely the field affects the 75 trillion cells simultaneously. And there are synchronized resonances that are all needed for facilitating or harmonizing different types of cellular communication. You got to think of like a spectrum or like broadband internet, 3G, 4G, 5G, and all the different bands that are nested in that, providing different information streams to everybody in the world, right? Billions of people. That's like the best analogy. So how do you recreate such a full spectrum bandwidth? Get it? That's why it's really complicated, and why most PEMF are just not that great, because they don't really do a good job recreating what I'm describing here in terms of how the body actually works. Okay, to be sending all types of harmonic cellular communications, because the body actually will organize and process and handle and do self-regulatory feedback loops on, like, let's say, enzymatic processes. It needs to do all that across the entire body beyond the speed of light. That's a well-proven biological fact. So that's the level of communication that we're talking about here. Needing to restore, that's when we're talking about like harmonized, synchronized resonances. You have to have that field in the body. Otherwise, you can't be handling billions and quadrillions, or who knows what it is, of organized enzymatic processes everywhere at the same time. So when the body has a response to something, like getting up from a chair or whatever, it has to organize all of that at the same time in the speed of light and faster, so that you can just immediately get up, or you could do whatever action you need to do. So every system in your body, think about it in this simple example, to get up in the chair, that's extremely complicated when you really get into it. Like, it seems simple. I'm just getting up out of my chair. Not a big deal, right? It's like, not really. Think about it. Almost like pretty much every part of your body that you could just label or talk about that we know about has to be somehow involved. And if it's not involved, you're not getting up out of the chair. Or you get up out of the chair and die or something like that. You see what I mean? Like, so it's really complex how everything has to stay organized all the time, which is also why when certain processes get disrupted, they have vast chain reactions. And then over years and time, as you age, it just continues to significantly amplify. It's a train wreck. or like one gear in a large gear system gets dismantled or gets affected, the rest of all the other gears also are simultaneously affected. That's again why PEMF can be very powerful and helpful, because it's treating all of that at the same time. It's supporting all of that at the same time. So in a body that's become disharmonic in some areas, which has vast effects on lots of different information being sent and frequencies, pursuing very simple, singular modalities and treatments, it's good. It can be helpful. But it's always going to have a very limited effect because the body's just far, far, far more advanced than that. So you could say like ozone therapy, right? It's just one example, right? Ozone therapy. Okay. Ozone is O3. It's just a gas, just one gas. It's simple. It's simple, right? So it will have more limited effects. It can be extremely helpful for certain things in the body, near miraculous, but it is still very simple comparatively to all the other things happening in the body, right? So PEMF is really kind of like unique, just extremely unique compared to anything else therapeutically that's out there. Hydrogen capabilities reduces oxidative stress in vessels, so can help cardiovascular. But in the QRS, it's helping cardiovascular through nitric oxide stimulation, which improves blood viscosity, activates ion transport in heart muscle, which it's doing this through the interaction of sodium, potassium, and calcium. Okay. Pain management. Anyways, you get the idea. You can pause it and just read these real quick, so you can kind of see everything here. And again, it's not covering absolutely everything, by the way. So if you're like excited about this, great. Well, there's more, but this video is already long enough, right? So I'm just doing some basic comparison here. So let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about here. Yep, both are extremely safe and have the studies, certifications, testing proving that. Both are some of the safest known modalities, actually, that are out there. So you're not going to have any contraindications with either modality. The only thing I will say is like if you're on blood thinner, blood pressure medication, and like you're just not in a good way, you know what I mean? And that medication's like keeping you alive, you know what I mean? Like you're that stage, then I would say any pharmaceutical will be improved in terms of delivery and effectiveness if it's in and around the usage of this PEMF. That won't happen, by the way, with hydrogen, but with this particular PEMF, it will happen. So usually if you take medications, you want to wait a couple hours away from the PEMF, specifically like blood pressure, blood thinner medication. Again, if that stuff's like keeping you alive, you know, you're in such bad shape, you just might want to ease into it, monitor things, talk to your doctor, but mostly just keep the PEMF a couple hours away from the medication. And then it won't have quite that effect on delivering it that much more effectively. Because if it delivers the medication that much more effectively, it's kind of like you took a larger dose. Does that make sense? Which maybe some of you are already thinking this, but if you start to see health benefits and your body starts to improve and you start to become more sensitive to your and responsive to your medication, would you need as much of that medication? Hypothetically, no. And then you could hypothetically, with guidance from your doctor, back off on that, right? And that's a good thing. So a lot of people have gotten off a lot of things, I will tell you, with the PEMF, simply by doing lab testing and other types of diagnostic testing. And I can promise you the majority of things you can test diagnostically in terms of health benefits, this PEMF, the QRS, will improve within a few months. Anywhere from, it depends on what it is, but anywhere from like 1 to 3 months. You will be able to track improvements on just about any diagnostic test because of how it's fundamentally affecting every cell with these core processes. So that's why it's not surprising, okay? With the hydrogen, I could guide you. So if you're like, oh, I want to do a thing where I'm going to do hydrogen for a couple months and then see what it changes on my panels, diagnostics, I could tell you what diagnostics you would see some changes on with hydrogen. The PEMF will basically have a wider effect, I would say, on a greater range of diagnostics. So we don't have to get too far into that, but if you want to have a conversation about that, you can just reach out and send me an email. Anything else right here? No, I think that's pretty much it for now. No, it's a long-winded video, which I should probably edit, but if you have questions about this and you're interested in buying hydrogen machine or the specific PEMF, just reach out. Give me a like and subscribe, as it really does help me to reach more people, and very few people ever find me on hydrogen and PEMF and all these other product categories that I talk on. So again, it really helps me if you like and subscribe. And again, just email me anytime. Don't hesitate. 7 days a week. If you had any questions about a specific brand or a health goal or health condition, I'm very responsive on there. My email is fitforreviews@gmail.com, right below in the description.